This week in Agribusiness, serving America's most essential industry, with agriculture broadcaster Orion Samuelson and yours truly, Max Armstrong, and featuring agriculture meteorologist Greg Solier. This week in Agribusiness is brought to you by Firestone. You never farm alone. Coming up on this weekend's broadcast, they are after the farmland, but not for farming. Hello, everyone. We welcome you in here. You have both of us this weekend. Pearson and Armstrong. Good to see you, Mike.
Good to see you, Max, as well. It's a treat.
You've been in Minnesota, I hear.
I was up in Wilmer, Minnesota, talking to ag producers about the technology that's coming in ag. And Max, it's pretty cool stuff.
We know you'll have something on crops in Minnesota coming up momentarily here. That activity is in play out there in the countryside with people wanting to get farmland for solar farms. They are signing up the land, as a matter of fact. There was a survey on that recently. The Purdue CME Group monthly survey asked producers how many of them had been contacted. It's still a fairly small percentage, but about half said they were being offered $750 or more to sign up that ground. That's far more than the crop rental rate in most instances. Then I asked about how much it would take for you to sign up the ground. In a Twitter survey, of those responding, about 12% said they'd look at an offer of $750. About a third, 35% of the respondents, said they'd need $1,000 per acre to do that. Meanwhile, more than half said no, there's not enough money to entice them to sign a contract to sign over that farmland for a solar farm. We're seeing a very strong generational difference here, Mike, that I have found. The farmer who's been out there for decades, who has cared for the ground, improved it through the years, takes a lot of pride in what he or she has done, is reluctant to sign it up. The next generation coming along behind is a little bit different story. They see the opportunity to capture value here immediately.
I think that's what it is. You're looking at a younger grower, perhaps a little more leveraged, a little more debt on the farm, and some guaranteed income. Wouldn't be a thing to sniff at.
You know, the sad part about it, as some have shared with me, it's divisive not only within a community, between neighbors, but also within families.
It certainly can be. And Max, I think we're going to have this conversation for some time in this issue. But first, let's go to Minnesota and get a crop update from Mr. Paul Zimmerman.
This one is started out unusual. It was like more dry than I have ever remembered. I'm 57 years old, been farming a lot of years, and I don't ever remember a summer or spring quite like this. The ground was like talcum powder, and then after Memorial Day, it was 2 weeks of 90-degree temps, which is 90 to 100 degree, which we never get, and everything, it was a little worrisome. But then cooled down a little bit. It's still been a warm summer, but the rains haven't been plentiful, but they've been enough. So barely enough, but enough. I would say trendline yield for us, we're going to be plus or minus of that, probably just minus of that by 1 or 2%.
This growing season has certainly been a challenge in that part of Minnesota, but we also had a chance to talk with Paul about the work that's been done on his farm for conservation, and this is work that has persisted through generations.
We live in Minnesota, and Minnesota's got a lot of 10,000 lakes, lots of streams, lots of rivers, and my brother and I got a lot of that from our father as well. My father was a big conservationist, dug a lot of ponds, planted a lot of trees, put up wood duck nests, all that kind of stuff. You know, he was a farmer, and they'd tile land and all this, but he was also very focused on getting marginal land back into wildlife production and things like that. Some land's better for cornfields, some land's better for conservation reserve or ponds or something like that. So my father taught us to try and know the difference, and we do. Yeah, we do what we can. I think most farmers are that way. They live there, they drink the water, they live on the land, they breathe the air, and we take care of it because we want to.
Farmers do conservation because they want to. Great insights from Paul Zimmerman. Paul, thanks for letting us tour your farm. Now let's talk about the markets. We have had a very, very volatile year in a number of different commodities, and we're going to talk to Darren Newsom of Darren Newsom Analysis about that. And Darren, while we're talking volatility, to kick this off, one of the most recent commodities to see some real volatility has been coffee. Talk to us a little bit about what's going on in the coffee market right now.
Yeah, it's an interesting place to start because a couple weeks ago, maybe a month ago, everybody was talking about how coffee was going to just continue to scream higher because of the winter weather going on in Brazil. Frost, snow, all these sorts of things that also played out in the corn market. But what's happened is the coffee market has broken down. We didn't see the fundamental support in the coffee market to hold it up at those lofty levels, and I think we could see another short-term leg down. Now, what's interesting is we've seen this sort of pattern develop in a lot, starting off in the soft sector, because, let's think back to lumber just a few months ago. It was screaming higher. We had an inverted forward curve, and then all of a sudden the commercial traders started selling. And so that inverse has moved into a pretty stout carry in the lumber market. Now, while I'm bringing this up, it's a template for what some of these other incredibly bullish markets could see. We've already seen some commercial selling begin in the crude oil market. This is seasonal in nature. We're running out of time for the crude oil to stay hot, but also soybeans. We've seen that inverse start to go to a carry as well. And so I think there's some warning signs out there. Am I bearish these markets? No, but I think there's some warning signs. We're going to have to watch to see if they follow those same patterns of increased commercial selling, putting pressure on these futures markets.
So, Darren, while we're talking about the soybean market, I was looking at a 6-month chart of November soybeans, and as I take a look at that, it certainly appears as though we're forming a pennant. It seems as though we're seeing lower highs and higher lows, and that market is forming a pennant. What does that tell you, or am I reading too much into this chart formation?
No, you're absolutely right. From a technical point of view, November soybeans look like they want to move down again. It would be a seasonal move. Normally they put in a low mid to late August. So I would not be surprised if we get a little bit of rain over the Midwest, here over the next couple of weeks to see November soybeans go lower. But the bottom line is, again, at least for now, fundamentals remain long-term bullish, and that hasn't changed. So once we see this sell-off, once we, get November soybeans to break that next leg down, then you're going to see this buyer step back in, unless something fundamentally changes, like what we talked about with lumber, crude oil, and so on. As long as the fundamentals stay bullish, I think it's going to bring buyers back in the longer term.
Darren, in soybeans, particularly in this new crop, as you look out, as you're figuring up your price forecast, do you think we could lose our beans in the teens, see beans move back to the 12 handle before the buyers start to come back in?
I'd be a little bit surprised if it dipped that far. Technically, yes, it could. Fundamentally, it's going to be more difficult, again, unless we see those spreads really change. Technically, yes, going back to that pennant that you were talking about, it would certainly project a target below 13. I think if it actually comes in below 12 before we would see the buyers come back in. But again, it's a technical pattern. And Newsom's rule number 6 says fundamentals win in the end, so that could limit the amount of the sell-off we see.
Gotcha. Darren, one of the things we've been tracking with soybeans is the products market, both meal and oil. Before we go to a break, Darren, what's happening here in the soybean oil market?
It's been like everything else. It's come under pressure here recently, but long term it still remains bullish. And I know that the last few days we've actually seen some buying coming into soybean meal. That comes and goes. Meal still seems to be kind of the third wheel, if you want, of this market. Bean oil, I think, is going to stay strong. We've also seen some buying come back into canola. So the oilseed complex as a whole still looks relatively firm.
All right. Well, we'll be back to talk the other markets with Darren Newsom, corn, cattle, hogs. They're all coming up. Stick with us on This Week in Agribusiness. This portion of This Week in Agribusiness is brought to you by the Soybean Checkoff. Tips, videos, how-tos, and more. If it has to do with ag tech, you'll find it in the Tech Tool Shed, your unbiased one-stop resource. And we're talking markets with Darren Newsom of Darren Newsom Analysis. And Darren, we've got to dive into this corn market. Of course, we're coming through the worst heat of summer. Pollination has occurred in most places. A lot of this crop looks okay, with the exception of the Dakotas and western Minnesota. But Darren, what are you watching here on the price level in new crop corn?
What's interesting about new crop corn is, again, from a technical point of view, and seasonal point of view, it looks like it wants to turn down. But what's really interesting is the last secondary or intermediate term low that it put was down at $5.25, and corn likes round numbers. It rallied back up, then came down to 507. So, the target now is if it would just hit $5. I think that's going to bring a lot of, I think that's going to be a breaking point. Either it's going to bring a lot of buyers in, there's going to be a lot of sellers waiting just below that $5 mark. So, we'll have to wait and see. And recently, we have seen the East July forward curve, and I look at the future spread here, start to see its carry begin to strengthen. It took out support at 13.75% carry level. So we need to keep an eye on that, because what it's indicating is just what you said. The market overall is viewing this crop as better than it might be expected to be given the weather that we've seen. And I've heard that from folks across the U.S., again, except for the northern plains, that they look out and this crop's holding together relatively well. Yeah, it's early August. There's still a lot of time. But for now, it's held together relatively well. And certainly the future spreads seem to be reflecting that.
Yeah, they certainly do. And Darren, as you look down the line, as we get into fall and then winter 2021 and spring 2022, I understand there are a lot of growers who are maybe being a little more hesitant on getting their cash sales on the books as they're waiting to see exactly how their production shapes up, particularly, as you mentioned, in the northern plains. For folks in that basket, as you look out into third, fourth quarter 2021, what are your price expectations here for corn?
Well, I don't like, I have a hard time playing that game because, because of chaos theory, we really don't know. But what's interesting is that both D's 2021 and D's 2022 are, their futures contracts are in the upper third of the price distribution range going back the previous 10 years. So, if you just want to use that as a guide, this isn't a bad selling area. You're going to do all right selling up here. Reason a lot of folks are sitting on the sidelines, there's a lot of talk about $7 corn, $8 corn, and so on. Could it happen? Yeah, it's always probable, but then the question is it, it's possible, but is it probable? And we have to wait and see. Fundamentally, it doesn't look like corn's quite that bullish right now. Could certainly change, but I wouldn't hesitate to get a little bit on the books in here.
All right, Darren, one of the markets that we have been watching for a long time, waiting for a little sign of life, now it's a come in the last 6 weeks, is the cattle market. What's heating up in cattle, and can we get bulled up about it yet?
Folks, anytime there's an up day, folks like to get bulled up about the live cattle market. So, that just goes without saying. But what we're seeing is something similar to what we saw a year ago, is when we've got boxed beef starting to firm again and the cash cattle market's been a bit slow. The break in the chain seems to be at the processing plants. Once again, we're not processing, enough to keep up with what, looks to be strong demand from the boxed beef market. Now, my question is, how long is this going to hold? The futures market continues to push higher, but my biggest concern is these wide carries that we've got in the spreads, October, December, Feb, and so on. This could start to put pressure on the market again longer term.
Something to keep an eye on there as we look out to the future. Darren Newsom from Darren Newsom Analysis, thanks so much for taking the time to share your insight with us this week.
Chad Colby's look at agriculture technology comes your way next, brought to you by the IBM Watson Decision Platform, combining AI with Internet of Things data to help agribusiness increase yields, improve quality, and drive sustainability. Yes, we've been talking about it repeatedly in the upcoming Farm Progress Show, that opportunity to get together again. As an agriculture industry, it'll be August 31st, September 1st and 2nd at Decatur, Illinois. And in his technology report this weekend, Chad Colby has been out to the show site. He shares a little bit about what he's been seeing and talks with the manager.
My travels this week, maybe a little intentionally, I swung by the show site for the 2021 Farm Progress Show in Decatur, Illinois, really for two reasons. Number one, wanted to see how the crops look, and number two, I'm a little anxious to learn about some of this new technology that's going to be unveiled at this year's show. If you haven't noticed, in the last couple tech segments, we've talked about some technology from Raven, we had sprayer drones from Rantizo, and guess what? They're going to be at the farm show with a lot of other equipment. Who knows that better than anybody else? Matt Youngman. And guess who I found checking out the corn this week as well? I caught up with Matt.
You're exactly right, Chad. The field demonstration corn is in great shape. It went in on time. The host farmers did a great job. We went a little bit earlier with the maturity, so everything's coming along really well. Corn's already got a milk line on it, and it's going to be ready to go come showtime. The field demonstrations are the backbone and the history of the show, and we're going to take off a bunch of extra corn ahead of the show to create an entirely new area, the autonomy zone, where you're going to have the Raven autonomous platforms, both of them running throughout the show. And then when the time is right, we're going to pull those tools and go put them in their applicable demos. You know, when it's time for the carts to run in the harvest demonstration that everybody loves, we'll pull that auto cart out and run it in the harvesting demonstration. When it's done, take it back to the autonomy zone. It can run there with the rest of the Raven tools. Also in the same place, you're going to have the Rantizo sprayer drones running. And then, you know, as you walk the show, as I walk the show in my mind, you can see the new equipment everywhere. It's been 2 years since we've all been together as an industry, and there have been brand new unveilings that folks just haven't seen in person. There are a lot of people who haven't seen the John Deere X9 or the new Gator or the 8RX from John Deere. Case IH has a new cab on the Steiger. A lot of brand new equipment. Versatile is coming with their new Delta Track with higher horsepower and a different transmission. New Holland has the T7. Kubota always has new things on their lot. Agco with the new Fendt Rogator. You know, you think of something like the Fendt Rogator, that's where you get into things that are making their North American debut. They just haven't been seen by the public anywhere. And there's been 2 years worth of evolution since we've all been together. And it's those moments where they lift the curtain and show you something brand new for the first time that happens at 8 o'clock on Tuesday morning of the Farm Progress Show that's just so exciting. And you know, we're showing you the corn because that's really important, but I can guarantee you that the show site is developing really well. There's new bins, new buildings, new things happening. There are going to be announcements still coming in the next 4 weeks as we lead up to the show. So I'd invite everybody to go check out farmprogressshow.com, get your advance tickets, get your hotel room booked, and check out the map. Make your plan. It's a big show to try to cover in 1 or 2 days, so get your plan together so that you can hit it and enjoy all of this brand new technology that you've been bringing to us, Chad.
Thanks for the update, Matt. We could tell there was just a little bit of enthusiasm in your voice. I've been working with Matt for years on the Farm Progress Show, and I can tell you this, I've never seen the amount of technology we're going to see this year, and I can't wait. Max and Mike, I'm guessing you guys are looking forward to one other huge thing at the show this year, and that is seeing all the people, and I can't wait.
We sure do look forward to seeing all the folks there. Each day, 11 to 12, we'll be with Case IH. Then come see us 12 to 1 in the Hospitality Building. And there was news this week of a concert that'll be going on. We'll have that story coming up a little bit later here.
Welcome back to This Week in Agribusiness. Across the country, a lot of folks are getting out to travel this summer. We've heard reports of hotels being booked up all across the Midwest as folks who have been trapped in their house in the cities get out to the countryside. They're driving a lot of miles. But some folks aren't driving cars. Here in the past few weeks, we had a big event come to Iowa, RAGBRAI, the Register's annual Great Bike Ride Across Iowa. It's an event where thousands of people get together and ride their bicycles across the state of Iowa. Get a chance to see a lot of the crops and meet a lot of interesting people. We are talking today with Vaughn Kettleson. He is with Carroll Broadcasting, fantastic broadcaster there in the western part of the state. He had a chance to ride RAGBRAI. Vaughn, how was it? It was a hot one this year.
It was a hot one. It was kind of like being at the Iowa State Fair, Mike. Nice and hot and humid, but that's kind of part of it. We had a wonderful time. After a 2-year absence, great to be around people again on RAGBRAI, and a great way to actually talk about agriculture here in Iowa and the Midwest.
Well, because that's one of the interesting things about RAGBRAI. It, of course, pulls people from all across the country. A lot of major metro areas send their cyclists to Iowa to ride this event. These are folks that don't have a lot of familiarity with modern agriculture, and now they're spending 7 days at 12, 15 miles an hour crossing the state, looking at all the agriculture. Vaughn, tell us a little bit about how that interaction happened. How were these folks reacting to learning about modern agriculture?
Mike, a fantastic opportunity to tell people about agriculture, and I wanted to salute the Iowa Corn Growers Association as well as the Iowa Pork Producers Association for doing just that, as well as a number of county commodity groups, a lot of county cattlemen's groups grilling on RAGBRAI, and County Farm Bureau is doing things. What we saw happening on RAGBRAI, Mike, this year was most notably the Iowa Corn Growers and the Iowa Pork Producers setting up displays every day during RAGBRAI, having games, interactive trivia things that educated urban people about agriculture, modern day agriculture. In the case of the corn growers, they would actually feed for free a lot of the riders, giving them free sweet corn. And we need to do more of this in agriculture. We need to tell the story of agriculture, that we're more than just milking one cow a day in the morning and riding an old two-cylinder tractor. And the people were very receptive. I had a chance to talk myself with a number of these urban consumers. I wear a jersey, a biking shirt that has questions and answers about modern agriculture. And that prompts a lot of questions and discussion. And it's very civil discussion too. People sincerely want to know where their food's coming. Another big question, what about GMOs, genetically modified organisms? How does that affect the foods we eat? So these were two big questions. And again, people were very receptive to that. Even those who maybe several generations removed from the farm, if even that much, are sincerely interested in agriculture. We certainly found that out here on RAGBRAI.
That is fantastic. You know, everybody's got to eat, and when so much of your food comes from the Midwest, it's great that people have a chance to get together and see it close up or right at hand. Vaughn, while you're on this bike ride, of course, you're actually taking a little piece of agricultural history with you. Can you tell us a little bit about your bike?
Well, Mike, yes, I grew up on an Iowa farm. Our tractor choice was red tractors, and I ride the only international harvester bicycle that you'll ever probably see on RAGBRAI or in the world. I modified a bike I bought 10 years ago, had it painted red, designed some international harvester decals, and I've turned it into an international harvester bicycle, which I call the 560 in honor of the tractor Dad would never let me drive. And I jokingly tell people that I don't run like a deer, and they see that when they're passing me on RAGBRAI. But that's another good way to open up some discussion. I've never seen that kind of a bike. And yeah, it's designed after a farm tractor, and we get to talking about farming and agriculture. And that also opens up the door to talking about what farmers do and how we try to feed the world.
Absolutely. And of course, while we're trying to feed the world, a lot of us rely on Mother Nature in order to get this crop out. Vaughn, RAGBRAI crossed the northern part of the state of Iowa, which is the part of the state that is the hardest hit by the dryness and kind of the drought that's going on right now. How did the crops look along your route? What all did you see as you were biking?
They're hanging in there. I happened to interview the president-elect of the Iowa Corn Growers Association during RAGBRAI. He was along promoting agriculture of the Iowa corn growers. And he told me on his farm in Hardin County, they're hanging in there, but I did see some stress signs of drought, that we need a good rain. We need probably several good rains here throughout Iowa and the Midwest. The crops for now hanging in, but we're getting that critical time with the soybeans setting pods that we're going to need some more rain here and very soon, Mike.
We certainly are. And of course, Vaughn, Carroll County, where your work, of course, is home to a lot of livestock. How are livestock producers holding up in your area right now?
Wow, it's been kind of a roller coaster ride, as you can imagine, Mike, with the prices we've been receiving. But, you know this, if you're in farming, you have to be an optimist. And these are people who hang in there. They've been through the tough times, and our family producers, our family farmers, especially those in the livestock sector, they just tighten up the belts and they go with it and keep going on. And I still think there's a lot of optimism out there. People are hungry for protein here and abroad.
They certainly are, and it doesn't look like that's going to change at all. Vaughn Kettleson, thanks for talking to us and sharing your insight.
Thank you, Mike.
You bet. And folks, we'll be back with more This Week in Agribusiness when we return.
This Week in Agribusiness, serving America's most essential industry, is brought to you by Firestone. You never farm alone. Welcome back to This Week in Agribusiness. Well, some of you in spring wheat country have been a little bit surprised at how good the crop actually looks. Others there in that northern tier of states, Mike, have found the yields are going to be just as disappointing as they had feared.
Yes, we're coming on the heels of a pretty good winter wheat harvest, but now, of course, that attention, Max, goes to spring wheat, and the northern plains have been hit quite hard. Al Gustin had a chance to talk to some producers up there and get an estimate.
The spring wheat harvest has begun here in the northern plains. There are some good fields. fields saved by hit-and-miss thunderstorms, but many poor ones. Getting a handle on the size of this drought-ravaged crop is proving difficult, but people want to know, the domestic and overseas buyers of spring wheat.
But those customers are very concerned about that.
Some of their representatives were in this room, members of the Spring Wheat Tour, gathered after day one to compare notes. One said he estimated the yield of one of the fields he looked at 57 bushels per acre, but another field at only 5.
This is very common with what we've seen this year in this area. This is a bad area. You know, the wheat's supposed to be 30 inches tall, and this is 10. And the head size should be 12 spikelets on average, and these are 6. And you know, there's just no yield in these. So
they're seeing this with their own eyes now. What we've been telling them is absolutely true. There's a lot of abandonment. There's a lot of 3, 4, 5 bushel yields out there.
The tour's final estimate, 29 bushels per acre, compares with 43 bushels 2 years ago. There was no tour last year. And as Fisher pointed out, abandonment is a big issue. The tour estimate doesn't factor in the uncounted fields that had been cut for hay because they were too poor to harvest. Still, there are some fields with good wheat, relatively high yields, and good quality.
There's good protein in much of this stuff. There's pretty good test weight in it. Some of the material we're seeing anyway.
That's somewhat reassuring to the end users, but they're already paying more to get the spring wheat that meets their needs and may have to pay even more in the months ahead. In its July report, USDA estimated the spring wheat yield at 30.7 bushels per harvested acre, down 18 bushels from last year, and if realized, the lowest in almost 20 years. An updated estimate will be issued August 12th. For This Week in Agribusiness, I'm Al Gustin.
Thank you, Al, for that report. The variability on this wheat crop is going to be a theme as we get through harvest. Next week, next Thursday, USDA will release their August supply and demand estimates, which will give us our next look at their expectations for this crop.
Now, agriculture meteorologist Greg Solier brings us his farm weather forecast for the nation for the week ahead. It's presented by Pivot BioProven, the nitrogen-producing microbes that stay put, whether or not.
Well, it's time to discuss the weather. Greg Solier joins us, and Greg, out west, those fires continue. We're taking note in the central part of the U.S. as that smoke continues to roll eastward.
Yes.
What's happening out in the Pacific Northwest?
You know, for the folks of the plains, the Midwest, the heartland, great sunrises and sunsets, spectacular, but a problem continues on, maybe to a lesser degree this week in the fire situation across the West and Pacific Northwest in particular. Systems will come ashore. There's more wind involved with these features, and of course, over the past couple of weeks, dry-based thunderstorms generate these dry outbreaks of activity, primarily lightning, and you're off to the races, of which we will continue to see some of these scattered storms. But again, a faster current of air, faster weather systems, more wind involved this week. And of course, across the Dakotas, continuing to be abysmal with regard to spring grain, the last of development or maturation or harvest, whatever you have up your sleeve. And there's just not a lot in the offing expected there, both early and late in the week. Warmth and the heat continues on, maybe a thunderstorm chance and another fast-moving windy weather system ashore into the Pacific Northwest. 100%, by the way, as of early August, of topsoil moisture, short and very short in Washington State. Haven't seen that since 1955. In the desert Southwest, put this into perspective, Tucson for the month of July, 8 inches of rain. That's a record. So there's this broad range of weather we've experienced across the West. The monsoon setup kind of breaking down a little bit. It's been into areas of the high plains over the past couple of days. The heat, the southern periphery of the hot dome, here it is, triple-digit readings into parts of Nebraska and Kansas. A front maybe comes ashore, a little monsoon moisture as well into position, and the tropics in the Pacific are getting active. Maybe some monsoon moisture expected there, along with downpours later in the week.
Well, Greg, as we look to the central part of the U.S., those soybeans are getting ready to kind of set their yield. What do you have in store for weather over this next week?
The wrong weather, heat, and too much of it in these dry, drought-ridden areas. Oh, maybe a thunderstorm comes on by. Triple-digit stuff, low to mid-90s, some upper 90s into Iowa, and the humidity as well. High humidity values, dew points in the mid to upper 70s, and of course, the corn and soybean crop pumping moisture back in the atmosphere where it's in fairly good order. Good stands in the eastern and southern complex. Little change with the hot dome centered from about the Black Hills to the Corn Palace and points on South southward. If we can break the atmospheric cap, the warm up will off, the thunderstorms will be off to the races. They'll make their way across the Mississippi Valley and into the Ohio Valley. A couple of showers down through Baja. That's a trip off of La Nina. We'll talk about that later in the broadcast. A couple of showers Gulf Coast, northern end, or at least the southern end of the heat into the south end and central area of the winter wheat belt. A couple of thunderstorms into the Ohio Valley. Oppressive humidity values. And looky here, some piece of energy. That means La Nina is getting going. The tropics of the Pacific will bring moisture in the southwestern states. Little change here heading through the next week or so in the deep south and southeastern states.
Greg, that heat and that humidity, how far east is that going to spread across the United States?
We'll get some relief later in the week. At least humidity values will drop a little bit. The heat stays on, roughly the tough stuff from about the Mississippi back to the west. We will get some storm clusters over the top and sliding southeast in that hot dome. The warmth into the northeast of New England. Of course, we've seen a worsening of the drought pattern across the areas of the Great Lakes region over the past week to 10 days. A couple of thunderstorms, Ohio Valley, the core of the heat, Mississippi Valley on westward again. Probably will corrupt soybean yields with readings in the 95 to 100 degree range. Hot and humid weather as you expect over the deep south and southeastern states. The tropical Atlantic and the Gulf, by the way, have quieted on down. A couple of showers and thunderstorms over the Gulf Coast area. A benign front here is the focal point for more rain. It's been a wet scenario over the southeastern part of the country. Seasonal weather back across sections of Texas.
Now, Greg Solier is back with his extended farm weather forecast for the country. Presented by Pivot Bio Proven. Visit pivotbio.com to find a representative near you.
Well, Greg, in your forecast, you touched on how we might see some thunderstorms start to develop. Where do you anticipate this rain to fall predominantly next week?
Well, we see maybe some opportunity into areas of the upper Midwest, parts of the western Corn Belt. That's if we can get some cooling up aloft. That'll occur. A couple of outflow boundaries. That's the rain-cooled air dropping down. Fronts will be nearby, the jet stream as well. If you can get one going, you may have a half a dozen thunderstorms going into parts of the upper Midwest, and they could trend heavy and severe. Front will stall on out. Little tropical system here, and there's more rain in the waterlogged areas of this part of the country, but we need the rain here. And look at this tropical system, an indicator of probably La Nina getting going and strengthening. It could be a name feature. It will draw moisture into the southwestern states here for the next couple of weeks. Maybe a spotty dry-based thunderstorm yields a quarter-inch of moisture. The fires continue in the Pacific Northwest and Northern Rockies.
Well, let's look out a little farther, Greg. The week of August 16th, what do you anticipate?
Here is the hot dome kind of reversed, but it's here, centered through the upper Midwest, western Corn Belt areas. A worsening drought again for the Great Lakes region and building on southward into the Great Plains. Below average across the deep south and southeastern part of the country, where the wet weather, if you want it, here it is. A weak disturbance here through Florida, the Gulf Coast, and back in through Texas, and we suspect something coming in through Baja, wet across the southwestern part of the country, wide and expansive through the upper Midwest, the plains, and westward, below average moisture.
Well, how about if we get to the middle part of August, August 23rd? Greg, what do you anticipate?
Of course, in August, the weather systems are slow to move. Same with the thunderstorms and same with the hot domes and the whole steering currents. And here it is through the Canadian Prairie down to Kansas City, Omaha, and points on east towards maybe Chicago. Probably some triple-digit readings here into parts of the plains and western Corn Belt. Not good news there. Still a bit below average deep south, southwestern part of the country and the southeastern sections of the nation as well, where the wet weather continues on. Monsoon moisture makes it all the way in to areas of the Great Basin and central Rockies. Wet weather down through Texas and areas across the Gulf Coast. Normal for the mid-Atlantic region. Active in this part of the country, and the hot dome keeps a lid on the moisture across much of the Corn Belt too.
Well, Greg, as we get to the last week of your forecast, of course, we're talking about the tail end of August. It's the Farm Progress Show. What do you anticipate as we get tens of thousands of growers into Decatur, Illinois?
Long lines at the beverage stand, and thank goodness a lot of those tents and facilities and exhibits are air conditioned these days. Some westward movement on some of the worst heat out across the northern and central plains. Would anticipate Decatur probably somewhere into the upper 80s, low 90s. That's not unusual. A little above average here. Some cooling into the northeast and New England. Gulf Coast area is a bit cooler than average. The heat across areas of California and points on northward. Now, from a moisture standpoint, anticipating probably, generally speaking, a dry Farm Progress Show with a tendency for below average moisture. You still can get some healthy rains in August, but we anticipate dry, hot, humid weather at Decatur. The wet weather pattern here is continuing over the southwestern part of the country. Tropical systems here building on northward in through Texas, the Gulf Coast area. area. We think the Atlantic Basin will stay pretty quiet for the next couple of weeks as well, but a growing concern of additional expanding dryness and drought issues across much of the central Corn Belt, back across sections of the Great Plains as well. Maybe some normal moisture in the Pacific Northwest. That's just going to breed more thunderstorm potential and back into areas of the Northeast and New England. So basically speaking, a pretty typical August weather pattern across much of the heartland.
Next on This Week in Agribusiness, it's Max's Tractor Shed, spotlighting another great American tractor.
All across the country, there are tractor clubs that gather together, and when they get together at this club in Missouri, you'll always see some Ford blue. Max's Tractor Shed is brought to you by Store Lock Tool Cabinets. Coming up at those shows at Rantoul, Illinois and Decatur, Illinois, the half-century of progress of the Farm Progress Show, you'll have the chance to see up close the quality and the beauty of those Store Lock cabinets. Go online to look at their products at storelock.com. Well, our friend Jerry Davis in Missouri has a lot of blue tractors, and that's why when they get together in the River Hills Tractor Club, you'll see a lot of Ford blue there, and you'll generally see that sign that says River Hills Tractor Club member. This is a Ford 9000. That, as it turns out, it's one of 3 that Jerry Davis owns. That club, the River Hills Club, got started, I think, there north of Cape Girardeau almost 35 years ago, back in 1988. They've done some tractor rides. I was with them on one several years ago there along the Mississippi River. Jerry Davis, I think, has been out there. His business has been selling equipment for more than 50 years. This one was sold more than 50 years ago. If you need good advice and counsel on an old blue tractor, or a new one for that matter, the Davis boys at Davis Implement can sure help you out. They're at Perryville, Missouri. Well, let's have Mark Stock help us out right now to tell us what's coming across the block of the week ahead at Big Iron.
Well, Max, on August the 11th, boy, do we have some outstanding late model, low-houred equipment selling on BigIron.com. Brooksfield Farms out of Ray, North Dakota will be selling a 2020 model John Deere S790 four-wheel drive SDS combine with only 114 separator hours. They have a 2020 John Deere 740 Flex Draper. They've also got a collector John Deere 4320 tractor. They got an Alice Chalmers 190 XT row crop tractor. Great equipment selling in Ray, North Dakota for Brooksfield Farms. C.L. Werner will be selling 185 items of ag, construction, and transportation equipment, including a John Deere 7800 forage harvester with only 1,000 cutter hours. They've got Peterbilt and Freightliner semi-trucks, plus construction-related equipment, wheel loaders, excavators, and motor graders. Unbelievable equipment selling for the founder of Werner Enterprises, coming up in Olathe, Colorado. Also, Jantz Farms is retiring from Copeland, Kansas. Here's another 2020 combine. This one's a John Deere S770 with only 319 separator hours. Also selling a John Deere 4830 self-propelled sprayer. They also have a John Deere 8370R and a John Deere 8530 mechanical front tractor. Max Big Iron will be selling some of the nicest machinery you'll find in North America on our August 11th online auction.
The FFA Chapter Tribute is sponsored by Nationwide, the #1 farm insurer in the country. To register your FFA chapter, go to nationwidesupportsffa.com. That's nationwidesupportsffa.com. Nationwide, we stand for you.
This Week in Agribusiness is proud to continue our salute to the FFA, and lately we've been getting to know the folks down at the Missouri FFA and their state officers. This week we're talking to Megan Fork. She is a vice president of the Missouri FFA. Megan, thanks for joining us, and what prompted you to get involved with FFA?
Thank you. So for me, I started getting involved in the FFA because it was so new to our school. I was a charter member of our chapter, and I come from a family that was very active in FFA. Both my grandparents were, and all my siblings were as well. And then my family, we run around 200 head of cow-calf operation, And so I was just very active in agriculture, and I figured that was a way to give back to the industry that has helped me to get to where I am.
And you did. You've been serving in FFA for a number of years. You serve on the County Cattlemen's Board. You are very, very active. Megan, as you look ahead to this next year, the role of Vice President is going to require some time. What are you excited for or looking forward to in this next year?
Yes, so I am very excited just to get to go out and meet new members. When I was a freshman in high school, I was very shy, and I did not want anyone to know me or who I was or why I was in FFA. And so I want to reach out to those members who may be in the same boat as I was and just get to know them and let them know that they have a big supporter coming from all parts of the state, even if we're not from the same area.
That's right. FFA is very, very supportive of one another. And Megan, as you go forward, what do your future plans include?
Yeah, so this fall I will be attending the University of Missouri-Columbia to major in agriculture education, communications, and leadership. And so I feel that educating goes more than just to the high school level. I feel like there's a lot of adults and children who are uninformed about agriculture, and I feel that to make a bigger impact, we've got to hit those groups as well. And so although I don't want to be an ag teacher, I want to be an advocate for agriculture to groups that are larger than just the high school level.
Fantastic. We wish you the best of luck. Megan Fork from the Missouri FFA.
Now, Samuelson Says. Insight and commentary from Orion Samuelson.
This week on Samuelson Says, I share with you a story that I received this past week that really concerns me. Let me quote. The Dominican Republic will slaughter tens of thousands of pigs after detecting outbreaks of African swine fever in 11 of the country's 32 provinces. Fernando Duran, administrator of the state-run Banco Agricola, told a news conference the government will pay pig farmers the market price of each animal slaughtered. Rafael Abel, head of the Agriculture Committee of the Lower House of Congress in Dominican Republic, last week estimated the slaughter would result in economic losses of around $180 million. Pork is a staple of the Caribbean country's diet and is a core ingredient of local Christmas dinners. Why does this story frighten me? Because a year ago, the hog population of China was sharply cut because of this disease, which is lethal. The only way you can stop its spread is to slaughter the animals. And so think what would happen if it came across the border into the United States. The U.S. Department of Agriculture has a program in place to prevent the spread of livestock diseases, but this one is one we really have to watch carefully. So let's keep it out of this country. Be safe, be well. My thoughts on Samuelson Says.
This Farm Progress Show coming up at the end of the month will be different in many ways. Folks getting back together for the first time, and there's going to be a concert, Mike.
That's going to be exciting, Max. What can you tell us?
News came out this week that Lee Brice will be performing on stage. That will be at the Farm Progress Show on the Wednesday. That will be September 1st. He'll be in concert there, and he'll be performing a new song. His new song called Farmer, as a matter of fact. It's a real tribute. And as we visited the other day, he told me, he's got a farm in South Carolina, and he has so much admiration for the people out on the land and the hard work and the work ethic there is in agriculture. So it'll be great to hear that. That, by the way, will be included in the daily ticket price for the Farm Progress Show that day on August 1st. I think that concert will start at about 5:30 in the afternoon after most of the activities. And if you paid to get into the show that day, you'll be able to go into the concert as well. Lee Brice on stage September 1st at the Farm Progress Show. All the information on tickets getting into the show, the way to map your show, find your way around, everything you need to know is at the website farmprogressshow.com. Then coming up on the night of August 16th on RFD TV, we'll have a Farm Progress Show preview. Now, I have a question for you.
Yes, sir.
There was a little discussion in the social media the other day about how you keep cool in the heat of summer. Some of us recall back in the day the way we stayed cool on the farm. How did you? Where did you swim?
Well, so we had several ponds on the farm growing up, all down in the pasture. So you kind of had to keep an eye out for what was upstream of you. But it was always a great fun time.
Some people had farm ponds, some had a creek, some were down swimming in the river. We weren't that blessed at our place. About once a year, I'd get to go to a municipal swimming pool, but we had the stock tank.
Oh,
yeah. And I've come to find out many people grew up that way. There was nothing elaborate about it. It wasn't beautiful. It wasn't fantastic. It wasn't huge. But my brother and I could climb in there on a hot summer day, get in on that cool, slimy moss on the bottom, have a cow lean over the edge now and then, or sometimes the pig would come up in the trough and bless us with his presence. There was always excitement at the stock tank.
There certainly was. And you know what? Last year, you couldn't buy a stock tank because so many people went out to buy them because they couldn't get to a pool.
Now you can buy one to have your pool, Mike.
That's right.
That's right. Home. Well, we hope everyone was blessed with such a great youth as we were. We have some fond memories. We hope you'll join us again next weekend here on This Week in Agribusiness. We'll share more of the farm story on This Week in Agribusiness. So long, everyone. Closed captioning for This Week in Agribusiness is brought to you by Kubota. Shape your world. This Week in Agribusiness is brought to you by Firestone. You never farm alone. This Week in Agribusiness is produced by Omax Communication in association with 22 Creative Group. We invite you to visit us online at agbizweek.com.